Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
We sure are.
And we're excited today. We have Adam Barralet with us. He has been observing and living in tune with nature since childhood, growing up amongst the bushland and wildlife of the hills in Western Australia and residing in various locations around the world has presented Adam with diverse opportunities to access extensive and eclectic teachings about the secrets of Mother Earth. He has a passionate curiosity for the messages of the plant world and adores diving into the depths of their love. He has a unique gift to simplify and personify each plant and the essential oils they gift to bring their individuality to life for you. He has now established himself as one of Australia's premier spiritual teachers, adept at working with essential oils, along with crystals, animal guides, tarot, astrology, and mythology. Adam's passionate, engaging, and relatable style of sharing the magic of nature has helped people all around the world change their lives and reconnect with the blessings of nature's gifts. Let him help you discover the secret messages that the universe eagerly wants you to hear. So we will hear what Adam has to say. So welcome, Adam. We're excited to have you on the podcast with us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So it sounds like you have a very eclectic mix of things that you do. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and where you are in life today as far as your spirituality and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess it all began for me when I was around the age of 17. And I walked into a little crystal shop and I bought myself an amethyst. And I took that home. And when I took that home, they gave you a little sheet of paper and it told you what all the different crystals did. So I read the sheet and I'm like, oh, I need that one. I need that one. So the next week I was in and bought another crystal and another crystal and another crystal. And to the point now where I probably in my collection work with about 350 different types of crystals. Um, Along at that same time as well, I was buying essential oils. I thought they were lovely to have these different essences of nature in your home. So I was kind of getting into them as well. Um, I was blessed to grow up in Perth, Western Australia. So I live in bushland area, so kind of like forest, where it's not unusual for me to have a kangaroo hop past my car as I sit in my studio working and different things like that. So nature's always been a really important aspect for me. And for me, just in those tricky teenage years and so on, while other people would go maybe sit in their room and play loud music, I would find real solace sitting out under the stars and amongst the trees and spending that type of thing. So for many, many years, crystals and essential oils and all things kind of natural was just something I lent into, on a rainy Sunday afternoon type of thing. And then I was blessed to actually come and live in Canada for 18 months. And I did a
Nice.
volunteer role there at the Toronto Zoo. And I was kind of in this bit of soul searching stage of my life. I was around the age of 30, and that time when Saturn returns to its original place in your birth chart. I'm like, what do I want to do? And I was really realizing that I loved everything natural. And we did the school program in Toronto where the students would come in every year and learn about the animals. And I couldn't understand why we had to wait until the later years to start talking about saving the animals, because that was such my passion. And probably the most profound bit of advice I've ever come, it's really interesting where guidance comes from, but it was just by the head of the education department there, said, people will only protect what they love. So if we start telling year ones and twos that, these animals are under threat and they may not be around in 10 years' time, they're not going to fall in love with them and want to protect them as they grow older as well. And that line of people only protect what they love really resonated with me. And so when I came back to Australia, I had this, I was working in a crystal shop. The first time I was talking to other people about what to do with crystals and essential oils and so on. I was invited to write my first book. And over the last probably 12 years now, my life has evolved to I work full time guiding people in how to help with their physical well-being, their emotional, mental, spiritual, and even their financial well-being, tapping into the powers of nature, which for me is an honor and lots of fun as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how do you then sort of guide people? Because I would assume that you go the more natural route with the oils, the crystals, being out in nature. to kind of heal their kind of wounds or their, where do I go in life? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, if we look back into our ancestors, that we didn't have pharmaceuticals back then, and different, the wise women and the wise men would have different plant medicine to heal with a whole range of different challenges that we may have. And then we've kind of gone a bit of a journey, and we've gone, oh well, if we take that bit of the plant out there, and if we do that, and we can create that in a lab, we can have pharmaceuticals. And I'm not here to bag pharmaceuticals; they play their role, but something amazing when we use a whole plant, it seems that nature just does it so much better and works with not just kind of counteracting symptoms, but more the cause of the problem as well. So what I love now is there's a kind of the circle is kind of coming we're coming full circle, I guess you would say, where science and nature are kind of merging and we're getting these discoveries and going, well, hold on. The wise women and the wise men of the past actually were onto something, and we can use essential oils. Yeah, I guess, we're starting to realize now that a lot of that plant medicine can actually be used for, different healing and things like that. So I guess what I do is I encourage people to get back to nature. It's amazing how many people don't, have fresh food, aren't drinking enough fresh water, aren't getting air, aren't getting sunshine, aren't sleeping enough. That can make a dramatic difference in people's well-being as well. Spending time out in nature and amongst trees is really therapeutic, and I've kind of gone down a bit of a journey with that. But then you can bring in essential oils that can have a really powerful impact on the body and then through to the vibration on the energetic. And crystals obviously work the other way, going from the energetic all the way through to the physical as well. So it's been really fun helping to allow people to kind of get back to nature. And my hope is that they fall in love with nature and thus then protect it.
Yeah. And I love nature, and I love
That'd be
essential
very good.
oils. That's that is a big one for me. But I do we camp in the summer, and that's my favorite thing is just to be able to get out there and be in nature and be in the quiet and just, pay attention to what's happening with the trees and the animals. And we don't have kangaroos, but a squirrel. But just really watching them and just kind of seeing how they really play into our lives and what kind of is showing up in our lives, because I really believe different animals show up in our lives when we need different messages as well, right? So it's like nature is talking to us about that.
Yeah.
Oh, so true. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there's a bird here called a kookaburra or the laughing kookaburra, and their call actually sounds like they're laughing at you. And that is one of the most typical animals that I have around my area, but you don't hear them every day. I always hear them when I'm busy adulting. When you're really serious because you've got serious adult things to do and all it's very stressful and all that type of thing. And then I hear the kookaburras laughing, and I'm like, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, no one's going to remember this in a year, in 10 years or 100 years. I'll be gone. Let's just have a bit of fun. And so you're exactly right. I think we see ourselves as a superior species that can kind of, we can create electricity and Wi-Fi and travel around the world and all those type of things. But if you put humans in nature, where we spend 99% of our time, we struggle. And so looking at how every animal from a spider to a stag deer, how they survive, I think there's great lessons in observing them all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And I love being out there because, you get your feet on the ground, especially in the summertime, and just, do kind of like that earthing and grounding and just getting back to nature. Because I do think we miss that so much in our day, like you said, like in our day-to-day life when we're adulting and trying to go through the process, it's like we kind of lose something of ourselves.
Oh, very much so. For the whole time that humans have been a recognized species on this planet, 99% of that time we've lived in harmony with nature. And it's only in the last 1% or less than 1% that we put ourselves in buildings with electricity and fake lights and different things like that. And we do have the ability to evolve, but just not that quickly. So we really do need to be back out in nature. And one thing that I discovered about 5 years ago that has been a real passion of mine is something that's called Shinrin Yoku, which is Japanese for forest bathing. And so we know that, the Japanese were very much, as a culture, we kind of know they're very hardworking. But one of the challenges they have in Japan is mental health, and because of the demands that are put on people. So the government in the 1970s and 80s started these different fundings to go, what can we do to help our population be in a more balanced state? And one project that was really successful is they found when you put people out in the forest, not necessarily trekking and like trying to get to a destination and back, but just meandering and engaging all of your senses and almost like that childlike wonder of like, we normally tell kids, stop touching things. But they actually like, get out there, touch a tree, touch a leaf,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
engage and become present with nature. They notice amazing things with like blood pressure would regulate, cortisol and stress levels would come down, concentration improves, sleep was better, cancer fighting cells in the body increased, and anti-inflammatory and inflammation went down. And so all these different things are showing us that we need to be out in nature, because that's where our body comes. We kind of go, oh, it was nice to spend a day out in nature, but that's actually where we need to be as often as we can. So the more nature you can bring into your life, the more it's going to support you in whatever you're trying to achieve in this lifetime.
Yeah. So it's kind of almost like forest bathing would almost be kind of almost like a walking meditation in nature.
It is, yeah, very much so. I take people on forest bathing exercises, and we do things where, I'm always like, no talking, just observe, look around, touch things. And then we'll do things like get to know a tree. So I'll actually sit down and, ask the question, this tree could talk to me. What would it say? And people, I've had female groups, I've had mixed groups, I've done children in forest bathing and that kind of thing as well. And you always go, oh, maybe there's some more manly men. They're not going to really get into this, but they really do. And they're like, I actually got a message from the tree, and that's really beautiful for things like for them to do that, and to for people to be present to we stop and go, can you feel the breeze on your face or the sun on your face? Or listen to the birds. And we always hear birds when we're walking through forests. But when we actually stop and listen, you actually go, oh, I can hear about 12 different sounds and 12 different birds, even though I can't see any of them. So it's amazing how much people discover and how afterwards they're just like, oh, I feel so much better, and it's a really joy to do. And what I love is that the science is now backing up that a lot of what happens is that trees release these things called phytoncides, and these are the trees use that to attract pollinators to repel pests, but they're also talking to each other. So just when you think you can get away from all the harshness of humanity, you go into the forest and the trees are talking about you as well. But when we breathe these in, when we breathe these phytoncides in, that's how we get all the good health benefits. And what's really exciting is the constituents that are found in forest air are also found in essential oils. So when we can't be out in nature, we can bring nature into the home and get a similar effect as well. And so that's one of the exciting things that I love to talk to people about is there are ways I would love to be in the forest every day, but I can't. There's no Wi-Fi. I couldn't do this recording in the middle of the forest, unfortunately. But we can bring different aspects of nature into our home in a really positive way and have great health benefits as well.
Right. I love nature. I just loved when the kids were growing up. I used to love taking them out to nature, watching the clouds, just laying in a field and looking up, sort of thing, just to get them to use their imagination and to listen to everything that was around them too. Right? But just nature's beautiful and everything that's in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing how in just one generation, I don't have children, to the best of my knowledge, anyway. But my brother and my sister both do,
Yeah.
and like I remember taking one of my nephews out for just a little bushwalk along a path and watching him freak out about ants on a path. And I used to try and don't make little castles and make the ants do what I wanted them to when I was a child. Probably quite torturous, but it's amazing how in just one generation, people become so much more disconnected from nature, and we see a whole
Oh,
range of challenges with our children today. Maybe nature does offer some solutions here and there.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that it absolutely does. And I love that. So can you talk about maybe some of the oils that you could bring into your house to kind of replicate the forest feel, and like can you meditate with them and things like that as far as getting that same kind of feeling as you would be if you were forest bathing or out in nature?
Yeah, definitely. I'll kind of give you a bit of a longer answer because there's a beautiful North American myth that I love. Forgive me, I don't know which area it comes from, but it was this idea that one day the creator said before humans were on the earth, he challenged all the plants and trees to stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights. Now, for the first night, most of the plants were able to do that. But on the second night, some of the little smaller plants, they fell asleep. And then the next night, a few more fell asleep. Night after night, less and less plants were able to stay awake. Until after the final night, only a few trees were able to stay awake and succeed in the challenge. They were the pine, the cypress, the cedar, the juniper, the spruce, and the fir. And so the Creator said to them, from now on, you shall be known as the evergreens, and when all the other trees go to sleep in the winter and lose their leaves, you shall remain and keep your leaves and be there as stewards of protection and guidance for all the animals I shall place on this earth and the humans as well. And so all of these beautiful trees give us amazing essential oils, and these are the ones that kind of release those phytoncides that I was referring to before. So any of your junipers, your cedars, your spruces, your firs, your pines, junipers, all those types of things are really, really great to diffuse, and I love to diffuse them when I see the sun set. So it's a really nice time to wind them down. Yes, you can definitely meditate with them, and each of these trees has a different. Juniper's really great for shadow work, whereas Douglas fir is really quite supportive when you're feeling like you're under threat and the whole world's against you. Pine is really kind of strengthening and empowering. So you can kind of build your own relationship with them, or I have YouTube channels and books that talk about them as well. Um, but they've found that diffusing them over an 8 hour period, so while you're asleep or when you're at your desk, can also have a lot of those benefits um, of what we've talked about, spending time in nature and breathing in those different aspects and chemistry of the trees and the essential oils.
Oh,
Yeah, I love working with oils. I do like to meditate, but I also use them for other things too. But I love that because I think the more people can bring some of those things in when they're feeling like their life is chaotic or out of sorts, bringing some of those in to sort of counteract that when you can't get out. And for us, like here in Canada, like, we get our -40. You're probably not unless you're really die hard and good for you, but you're probably not going out trekking in the forest at that point.
No, exactly. So yeah, those little things, even that you read a lot about house plants, and also having crystals around the home. All those different things will make a difference for sure. And I've noticed that for myself, in my own health journey, and I've noticed it as I help other people do that as well.
what if they ever thought about putting something like this in institutions and that where people are already at a high level of stress? Wonder what would happen in a case like that if they put that into there to see if it would calm them down. Wonder if it's ever been a study.
There have been studies. I don't know how much in like offices and that kind of high pressure thing, but there has been
Right.
some really interesting studies in like certain hospitals, diffusing essential oils like bergamot, which is a citrus oil, and how both patients and visitors and staff all reported feel you know feeling better and different things like that as well. So there there is still, there's manipulative ways that essential oils are used in shopping centres and casinos. You probably don't notice it because our human sense of smell isn't very strong. But in some shopping centres and casinos, they will either diffuse a citrus or a vanilla, not necessarily from a plant, because unfortunately it's cheaper to make artificial fragrances. But when we think of citruses or vanilla, we feel happy. And when we're happy, we're like, no, why not? I'll buy that shirt anyway, or I'll buy those shoes, or let's put another $10 on the pokies and that type of thing as well. So scent is
Right.
used in positive ways and sometimes in slightly manipulative ways as well. Even if we don't notice the smell, it can have a great impact on our psychology. And I've got clients of mine that actually have no sense of smell, but lavender still helps them get a better night's sleep, and peppermint wakes them up in the morning, even though they can't smell it.
Well, that's cool too. Yeah.
That is true. And I know with my husband, am always like, he's like, oh, it stinks. I'm like, whatever, just use it anyways. Where I'm going to put that on. Other than, I guess that was one thing that I learned because I was a little bit, overzealous with some of them. And then it's like, you can't breathe. So I didn't do it right, but I'm much better.
Oh, good, yeah. There's a lot of one of my favorite stats that I'm often touting around is that 70% of what's sold as pure or organic lavender in the world is actually not from a plant. And so sometimes a lot of people, and I'm sure some of the things I worked with when I was in my younger years, probably they smelt like lavender or they smelt like palmarosa or lemongrass, but they weren't. And so we kind of throw all that in the diffuser when you actually find someone who, gets their oils from a native country, has someone else test them so they're pure and that type of thing. You're still kind of in that old habit of 15,000 drops in the diffuser, and then you have whinging partners that are like, oh, hold on, you're now trying to kill me. So you only need a little bit, which is really quite powerful as well.
Yeah, and I love that. And I love like how all the things that you do really tie into nature. Like, because I think like even astrology and things like that, we're all going back to kind of how it used to be when we were healing from the earth and, finding our wisdom from the skies. And I think that's really interesting that you kind of pull all those things into your repertoire to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that no matter what's happening in the heavens, Mother Earth loves us and gives us the tools that we need for that. So I know, when we're having this chat and when this episode's coming out is a little bit later, but in early April, Mercury will still be in retrograde, which a lot of people are talking about. But we also have Venus, which is in retrograde as well, and a couple of major feminine asteroids called Juno and Vesta. And so there's this real kind of theme around all of this time of feeling unloved, um, and kind of wanting to correct and work out, do a bit of a cost benefit analysis on all the relationships that are in our lives and whether we're being the best person, whether we're overstretching ourselves and doing too much for other people, and whether we need to focus our time, energy, and attention on other relationships and not particularly this friend or that family member and that type of thing as well. So we can lean into different essential oils around that time. I love another cypress tree from Canada. It's known as Arbor Vitae, or the tree of life. It's this beautiful wood oil, and that's a really nice one to work with. It's very grounding and protective because retrogrades always bring a lesson, but a lot of people get obsessed with the chaos. Do you know what I mean? If we had a really easy life, we wouldn't learn anything, kind of thing. And each retrograde gives us a little test, and Mercury tests us in how good a communicator we are and shows us where we can improve. And Venus is very much about, are we happy with all the relationships in our life? But leaning into Arbor Vitae, I use a lot of eucalyptus, cypress, and chamomile for the throat chakra. With Mercury retrogrades, with Venus, rose is a really beautiful one to have on the heart, to bring that kind of clarity on to navigate through those lessons. So I always say, just like today, there's forecast rain and thunderstorms here in where I am in Australia. If I go out, I'll take an umbrella. And if I know that Mercury is going into retrograde, I'll have my Arbor Vitae and my eucalyptus, so I'm prepared for whatever is happening from the heavens as well.
I love that.
Well, that's very cool. That's very cool that you're that prepared that you take, always do that for yourself. People should do that for themselves because it brings love and makes you feel good when you have something with you that's always positive, right? So,
Oh, you're exactly right. And I love the point you're saying there, people should do something for themselves. It's amazing how in this day and age, we wake up in the morning and Spotify tells us what we should listen to. And Netflix tells us what we should watch. And our social media like Instagram and TikTok tells us what we should know, type of thing. And a really great exercise I encourage everyone to do is when you get up in the morning, stand in front of your essential oils and your crystals as well, and just ask yourself, what do I need today? And I often say, categorize it. Do I need an uplift? Am I feeling a bit flat and I need something uplifting, like a floral or a citrus oil? Or what am I, kind of like a citrine or a, kind of an uplifting crystal? Or am I feeling a bit scattered and I need grounding? Do I need a big tree or do I need a root or a seed oil to ground me down? Or do I need something like a smoky quartz or a black tourmaline? And just by doing that exercise of asking, what do I need today before we kind of get into the world with all its recommendations and demands? It allows us, I think it's one of the most spiritual activities we can do of purely listening to ourselves. We don't need to sit on a mountain for 3 days to become enlightened. We just have to shut up and listen to ourselves occasionally.
Yeah, that is so true. I have a little box of crystals, and every morning I pick out a couple of crystals and I do it somewhat intuitively because I always laugh when they come out, right? Because it's like, oh, interesting, the ones that I got. Like today, the color of the day was topaz, and then I pulled out of my crystal box a topaz. I'm like, clearly I need that color with me today.
Yeah, I love that. Working at a crystal shop, it was so funny watching adults as they would like a crystal, and then straight away they were like, "Oh, why do I need this?" And they want to grab the crystal book or something like that, and so on. As opposed to children who were just like diving in and just, "I want that one, I want that one," and they didn't care. They didn't have that kind of logic kicking in and interrupting their intuition and that sort of thing. And I love what you're saying about the topaz. I think I would love everyone to do that exercise and read the crystal book in the evening and then reflect on, wow, that is quite synchronistic considering, that my boss was being a pain in the bum today. Now I understand why I chose that crystal type of thing.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great thing to share with everyone because I think it is important too, because I think too often we're rushing through life and we're just, like you said, we're allowing everything to tell us what we need to be doing. And we need to really start getting back to that intuition of our own to be able to say, this is what I want to burn, or this is this is the oil that I want with me, or to diffuse today. And then look into them like later, as you said, or sometimes depending on what you need, I suppose you would pick the one, like if you're doing some shadow work or something, then you'd pick the one relevant. But I think it's just really important that people, I know even when we do a monthly reading on our podcast every month, and we just intuitively pick the cards that we're going to use, and then we always laugh because they all go in line with each other. So same thing, right? Just using that intuition a little bit more, I think people would open up even just to help themselves out of situations.
Very much so. And, I think we would all love to live in cottages where we could just kind of potter around all day. But unfortunately, we've got bills to pay. So we do have to work and we've got different responsibilities and obligations. But giving
Mhm.
ourselves little check-in points, whether it be the first thing in the morning, or what I find really interesting is, when we talk about, I hate to use the word regular person, but we see often, they do a check in once a year, and it's normally at the end of the year. So they kind of work with the solar energy. And I hate December because everyone's like, thank God, everyone will be like, thank God 2025's over. Bring on 2026. It's going to be brand new, and this is going to be my year. And they're going to do the same thing for that year, and they'll be at the end of 2026, the same story as well. But for individuals like ourselves, which work with the moon, what I love is that the moon is each full moon is in a different sign, and each of the signs governs a different aspect of life. So it gives us at least one day, or if you work in that 3 day period, to sit down and go, hold on, let's check in with my health. Let's check in with my money. Let's check in with my relationships based on which sign it's in. And the more we check in, if you're going on the wrong path and you realize after a year, it's a big deviation back. If you're going on the wrong path and you notice after a couple of days or after a month, it's a lot easier to get back on track. And I find that we have a more intentional life and we go where we want to go rather than just kind of being pushed down the river of life and going, oh, I didn't think I'd end up here. This kind of sucks.
You're
Yeah,
quite funny.
that is so true. Like it is so true that I love what you say because Well, we do a lot of stuff with the full moon too, and I think it is a good check-in point. And, it's not hard to bring, that's the whole thing, is it's not hard to bring some of these practices into your life to give you these little checkpoints along your way to start leading your life in the way you want to lead it, as opposed to just allowing life to, just like you said, just like kind of swim you down, right? And be like, oh, here you go. This is how we're going to continue on with your life. You
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's those little check-in points. I've got a friend who's been very successful financially, and she's always posting on her Instagram. Oh, this morning I just went for a wander around my lake, and then I made myself a cacao and read a book for an hour. I'm like, girl, no one with a normal life has time to do that. But I think those little things, like you said, standing in front of your crystals, going, which one shall I wear today? Deciding what oil goes in the diffuser in the morning, in the evening, and at night. Um, on the full moon, one of my favorite things on a new moon, especially, is what I call a cup of tea meditation. So you make yourself a cup of tea and you go sit outside. Now, what I love about a cup of tea is it's very similar to smoking. It kind of forces you to sit down for 5 to 10 minutes because you can't scull a hot cup of tea, and you just sit there and drink it, and you take time to ponder, and you might just reflect on the day, or you might go, okay, new moon in Taurus, where am I at with my money, and what do I need to do? Am I overspending? And kind of think about that for a few minutes. So those little, I think 5 minute and 2 minute rituals in the shower, when you're getting dressed, when you get in the car at red traffic lights, all those types of things can help to bring in a much more magical life if you don't have whole mornings to sit there with your sacred cacao and do yoga practice and then read a book and do your mantras and talk to your guru and everything like that.
Yeah. Although that would be nice. I'd be
Yeah.
totally down for that.
One day, yeah. When I get to the end of my big to-do list, it keeps growing.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, so your books, do they talk about some of these connections between the crystals and the oils and things like that?
Yeah, very much so. So I've got a main crystal book. It's called Crystal Connections, and there are millions of crystal books out there. And I found, especially when I had this job in a crystal shop, that a lot of the crystal books will tell you that a rose quartz is good for love, and a citrine is good for happiness, but they don't tell you what to do with them. So a lot of people buy these rocks. They get home and they're like, now what do I do with you, type of thing. So my book, Crystal Connections, talks about okay, so you've got your rose quartz, you can do this with it, you can do this with it, and gives different suggestions. But at the start of each chapter with each crystal, I give a matching plant and then also talk about the astrology and that type of thing as well. So I'm linking them there. I've then got a major book on essential oils called Gifts of the Essential Oils. And again, there's lots of little crystal references in there. And then I've got a new book come out recently called Oil Magic, which is basically all the popular essential oils and my favorite three crystals to pair with them and how to pair them together. So, all different ways of using them together. One of my favorite ways that I like to share is a little idea that popped into my head one day, is what I call a crystal cauldron. So, what this is a really easy way to combine a crystal and essential oil that have similar energy. So, we might go with citrine, which we know is about self worth, it's about happiness, it brings abundance. And bergamot is actually very similar as well. So, a lot of times we'll make crystal elixirs and pop crystals in water, and we might spritz that around, or in some cases, when it's safe, we might drink it or bathe in it or something like that. So, I'm thinking, well, what happens when we have a diffuser? We get a tumbled citrine and put that in the diffuser with the bergamot. We're now combining two energies and dispersing that around our space. So I kind of teach people about, putting quartzes like rose quartz, smoky quartz, citrine, amethyst, just one in our diffuser with a matching essential oil, and creating a little magical crystal cauldron whenever you need to.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I like that.
I do too.
I
I
can,
have to try that out.
I can see your eyes going up, Kimmy. I thought,
She's like, she's on that right now. Because I do love that, because I do love crystals, and I think there's just so many, properties to different crystals that we can use to enhance our lives. And it's simple, right? It's just so simple. And that's what I think I love about that, is like you're getting back to nature. I love the herbs and things like that, because you're just getting back to nature, which is where I think we need to be.
Very much
Mhm.
so, and it's just little things. By me today wearing a star garnet pendant and not wearing something that's made out of like a polymer or a plastic that you can buy different jewelry in and that type of thing. It's just those little steps, and the more we inch back to nature, there can be no harm in that, as far as I can see.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like, as much as we've advanced in the world, and I think that there's a lot of great things with technology, and, we could, like you said, we couldn't do like interviews like this, without it. But it's funny because it seems like as fast as the world is getting more chaotic and moving forward, we're actually starting to slip back into some of our old ways. And I think that's really interesting. And I think, well, it's time that it's been happening this way.
Very
Mhm.
much so. It's kind of that stereotypical story of someone who, works their way up the corporate ladder and has this high pressure life, and all they dream of is retiring out in the country type of thing. So we all know that there's something within us, and sometimes it's very quiet, and sometimes it's very, very loud, that we need to be in nature. Had the opportunity of living in Bahrain in the Middle East in for 18 months a couple of years ago. And for me, for someone who lives in the bush and I'm looking out all the windows around me and all I can see is green, to live in the Middle East where I could not see a single tree, it was amazing how I really felt it, deprive me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, just not being around any aspect of nature in that way. And the five house plants that I ended up getting, God, I think I was very demanding. That was a very demanding relationship and very one-sided because I just needed them around me all the time. They were my only bit of green in a very brown, kind of beautiful country, but very, very hard and challenging not to be in touch with nature. So I really felt how much we need nature when it's not around.
Yeah.
Well, that's very true. I have an aunt that moved from Ontario in Canada, where there's a lot of trees and that type of thing, and moved to Vancouver, which is in Canada, which is a lot of rain and it's near the ocean and things like that. And within 1 year, she started losing her hair
Wow.
because
Yeah.
of not being close to what she was used to. So when she got back to Ontario, where she was from, where there was so many trees, because it was Peterborough was quite a nice place, her hair grew back in and everything else. So that was definitely saying you could never live in that other place because it gives you nothing. Sort of the story you just said, you know, definitely diminished her happiness.
Yeah, I love that story, and I think there's a great series on Netflix. Not that I should be plugging Netflix, but it's to do with the blue zones. These areas in the world where people live to, a large amount of people live over 100, and Dan Buettner looks at why they do that. And I remember there's one little story about someone who was living somewhere in the US, got cancer, and was kind of given not long to live. Went back to, I believe it was Sardinia, and is still now alive, kind of thing, just
Wow.
because he totally changed his food and his environment and different things like that. So, although we think that we can remove ourselves from nature, we can't.
No,
The classic examples that we've just spoken about there.
Yeah. That,
exactly.
that is a very good film. I think people should watch that one because it's very interesting how, really it comes down to what we're eating, what we're drinking, the people that were around, the community, like all these things. And people are living to, 100, 107, but healthy, not sick in hospitals, not, needing all these things, but they're active, they're eating well, they're, laughing and being out in nature. And so I love that series too. I think everyone should check that one.
Yeah, it just adds little things in, and they were all active, but none of them were at the gym. It's just they were pottering around. They were gardening, and a lot of them were just growing their own food, and that meant that they had to be active, and they were lifting and carrying things that weren't that heavy. They weren't pumping weights at the gym, but yeah, all those. Yeah, it's an amazing series, and again, in theme, it's just we need to be back to our roots around nature, moving our bodies with people. Community is so important as well. That's something I really got out of the series of how easy it is in this day where there's so much work to be done that we kind of don't have time to catch up with people. So it's really interesting. Yeah, great series and had some really strong messages that I try and teach other people that I'm working with as well.
I think the community part was really, I found so interesting because like a lot of these places do like when they have dinners and stuff, like it's a big to do for their dinners, and it is so community, right? It's their families and they're making it together and they're eating and they're not rushing through it and watching TV. They're, sitting and having these conversations and laughter, and I just think that's just so important for people. And yeah, I guess what would be your thing to say to people then if they wanted to kind of get started living a more healthier, natural life? What are some suggestions that you would make?
I think, you know, some people are into crystals, some people aren't. Some people like essential oils, some don't. So you've got to kind of find your jam with that type of thing. I'm a forest person. I'm not a beach person. My mother tells this story to embarrass me occasionally that when I was a young kid, I would refuse to stand on the sand. I didn't like it. And so she would have to push my stroller through the sand whenever they went to the beach, kind of thing. So I think we've got to find what aspect of nature we love. Some people love houseplants and that, and then run with it type of thing. But I think we have choices what we do on our weekends a lot of the time instead of maybe going to a restaurant. Although I'm a fan of supporting local businesses, can you go for a picnic out in the forest? Can you kind of bring in aspects of nature wherever you can? I think, and look at what you're drawn to. And if you don't know what you're drawn to, go wander around a crystal shop and just buy something that looks pretty, even if you have no idea what it's for. Go and snort some essential oils and work out which one you like, and then do some research to find out what's this one good for and use it appropriately, type of thing. I think just like when I walked into a crystal shop and bought an amethyst, and it kind of turned into this hot mess that I am today, type of thing. I think just go back to that childlike curiosity of immerse yourself in a natural scenarios and see where you end up.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a
Yeah.
great idea. I think a lot of us have lost that child within us, right? Because we want to be successful, and not that there's anything wrong with that, because I think it's great to be successful, but I think there also needs to be a part of us that remembers that we need to play and have fun. And I know like when we were growing up, that was one thing in our house, like there was a lot of music and there was a lot of fun and laughter. And so I think that's something that we need to get back to as people now, is to bring that back into our lives and find that childlike wonder.
Yeah,
Mhm.
wonder and childlike curiosity. Exactly. I guess as adults, we're very much on, we need to know the answers. And this is one thing, I do a podcast with a group called Crystal Confab on crystals, and I do another one with a great UK aromatherapist called Fellowship in Essential Oils. And a reoccurring thing that we are constantly saying when we're talking about, when it comes to oils and physicality, science kind of supports that. But when it comes to spirituality, we're always like, we're not right. And I'll often say it in classes, I'm sorry, I know you spent 6 hours with me, but I just want you to know that I'm not right. What our role is to share our suggestions with you and then allow you to go and find the answers for yourself and what it means for you. Earlier I said citrine works really well with bergamot. You might be going, no, it doesn't. Citrine would be much more better with orange, or it might be good with lemongrass. And I'm rapt that you disagree with me because you've gone on that journey, that childlike wonder and curiosity, and started thinking for yourself. So, I hope that people just go and just be curious and be curious what other people have to say, and be curious about what you can discover, no matter how old you are. The less you know, the better, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, be an internal seeker.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There
And
is
I think I've
oh,
always been that way because my mother was somewhat of a gypsy, so that just instilled that in us, right? Just keep, yeah, searching.
yeah, very much so. There was something. Forgive me, I can't remember if it was the Greeks or the Romans that I read recently, and they said there was two main types of conversation. There was philosophia and philonarchia, and philonarchia was debating to try and get your point across, and philosophia was conversing in the with the aim to gain further wisdom. And I found that really interesting how many people, when they converse these days, are very much philonychia, where it's like, I'm just trying to tell you what I think, and I'm just trying to tell you. But there's not this interest of like, so why on earth do you think that? And, we see in the world right now these divisions and these remergings and these political arguments and all these things of like, I'm right and you're wrong. And I think that, again, we can go back to that childlike curiosity of like, how can we all work together? When we go into a forest, there are, you know, there are different species of trees and plants and animals, and there's fungi and things happening under the soil and all that. The diversity is what makes a forest thrive. And if you were just to plant pine tree after pine tree after pine tree after pine tree and eradicate everything else, that's not a healthy ecosystem. So if we're talking about getting back to nature and nature being a great teacher, I think looking at wanting to converse with people and understand people that are different from us, because we do tend to surround ourselves with people that agree with us so we feel better, can be really quite expansive as well.
Very nice.
Yeah.
We lived in the mountains in Canada for a while, and the years that we lived there are such wonderful years because we were right in nature. We had, where we lived was, and the experience that was there when we had the grandchildren, the Kimmy's kids there, what they learned and how their minds grew was unbelievable after being in a busy city. And one of her sons still lives in the mountains, and that's where his preference is. So, he's very dab into nature where he likes it. But some of the best memories are there, from that part of the life,
Very much so. And, probably as well, those memories were free. You didn't have to spend $300 to go to Disneyland or something like that kind of thing. It was just this cool tree and this lake and swimming or something simple like that as well. Which, in a cost of living crisis that we have in most of the world at the moment, a lot of the time nature's free, which is a benefit as well.
It was fun for us because when there is the comets coming in some different times of the year, jump in the car and run up and sit on the top of the mountain to watch them on complete darkness, right? And complain about the mosquitoes. But I mean, it was fun because you wouldn't do that if you lived in the city. You don't take those times, to just jump in your car and go see what nature really does have to offer you, and the stars. It was beautiful.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously, the majority of people live in cities, but there's still those opportunities to get out of the city or to bring these aspects of nature that we've been talking about into, you can still live in an apartment and be very much in touch with nature and the moon cycles and, change your behavior as the sun sets at the end of the day and all those types of things. Wherever we live in the world, we can still have that contact. But yeah, you're not going to get me living in a big city. I'm always going to be a bush and forest man.
That's amazing. Well, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Most certainly. Anyone who loves astrology, I'm your typical Gemini, so I'm bloody everywhere. If you basically just look up my name, my main playgrounds are Instagram, where I'm posting 3 times a day. I talk about all the lunar cycles, astrology, crystals and oils all the time. I have a YouTube channel which talks about different things, and that's where my podcasts are. If you jump on my website, I have a weekly newsletter, and this is something I'm really passionate about, and kind of maybe one of my closing points is what happens when we love crystals or we love essential oils is we end up gathering them all up type of thing. And, with crystals, we might have 5 in our handbag and 3 in our pockets and a few on our fingers, and women have got 6 in their bras, and it can be the same with essential oils as well. And what I affectionately call people, and forgive my language, but Australians are renowned for swearing, is you become a crystal slut or an essential oil slut. And so what I teach is a little bit of monogamy. And so each Sunday I send out my newsletter and I say, I've chosen 1 crystal and 1 essential oil based on what's happening astrologically this week. And what a lot of people start doing is they're like, okay, so this week it's all about garnet. So that's why I'm wearing it. And what we do is we just focus on our garnets. We focus on, the essential oil that I've chosen as well. And you really get to know them. So you have that bit of monogamy for the week. And then next week you can focus on another one. Because so many of us do. We love these things and we have hundreds of them. And again, we might as well just take them back to the shop because we're not using them either. So this can be a really great way. So, So my newsletter's there. I'm on Facebook, and a podcast and all those different types of things. So Google me and you'll find me where you like to play and scroll. I'll probably be hanging out there as well.
That is wonderful. Well, we appreciate you being on with us. And if you had a final thought to leave with everybody, you just kind of said it, but we'll give you a chance to give another final thought or piece of advice to everybody.
I hope that from listening to today that maybe, that there is lots of different things that you can do to get out in nature, but maybe just try one thing this week. Maybe go, okay, well, I've got a little bit of time on Saturday. Maybe I will go to that crystal shop and check that out. Or maybe, on the way home tomorrow, because the sun doesn't set till a little bit later, I might pull over and just do a lap around the park and things like that. Where we get to when I'm talking about all these elaborate things you can do, it's bit by bit by bit, it's incrementally, and that's how we make the change. But trust me, any time spent with something natural, whether it be in your home or out in nature, is only going to be beneficial for you, your family, and the entire community as well. So really spend as much time in nature as you can.
Beautiful.
I love it.
Very nice.
Well, again, thank you so much for sharing space with us. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you'll come back at some point when you write your next book or whenever, you feel the whim to come with us, because we've had just a wonderful time talking to you. And I think that you've given a lot of great points for people to tap into and to find ways to get back into nature and, bring some happiness into their life. So thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Maya,
Yes,
it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Everyone else, we will see you next time.
you bet.